Hey, if you haunt the same digital spaces as I, you may in recent times have felt the presence of or engaged with a certain figure. The unhinged woman has recently occupied a lot of cultural discussion for various reasons, and after the era of the collected, capitalistically strong girl boss woman, it's no wonder the pendulum has swung the other way to the toxic, messy, mentally unstable actions of the oppressed and repressed, women who express those deep, dark fantasies of release, women pushed to their absolute limits, who don't cater to men, who exist outside the bounds of acceptability or respectability, who behave in ways we often wish we could. But recently, a lot of this art has ceased being cathartic to me. Perhaps it's a symptom of getting older, of beginning to witness just how caught up in trend cycles women's identities are, but the meteoric nature of the unhinged woman, of that one bright burning moment, has recently left me empty. Because then what? She is reduced to a blob on the pavement. She is murdered. If she's lucky, she'll get to pick up the pieces of her burnt life, though we probably won't see that because the horrors of dealing with the mental health care system are less entertaining, I guess. And I've been thinking a lot about gratification and about spectacle. Is the unhinge a challenge to patriarchal constraints, or is this focus on the what in danger of becoming a distraction from the why? To be clear, works that may fit into this category that may come to mind are varied and diverse and often nuanced, and I have found a lot of solace in books like those. My favorite character of all time is Mary Cat from We've Always Lived in the Castle, but I just can't help but draw a link between the virality of this woman to the preventative Botox 10-step skincare routine, ballet core, prairie girl fetishization of youth. At what point does resonance verge on enabling, reduction to an aesthetic offering a sort of aspirational picture of psychological stasis? And whose suffering is considered desirable? Who do we laugh at? Who do we turn away from? Whose is uncomfortable? So I want to talk about a few books that have helped me grapple with these questions. Some explore how time moves forward after the breakdown, or the woman who enters her 20s and, God forbid, her 30s and must navigate a new period of social isolation and perseverance. When you're 27, have no money, no prospects, and are scared, well, Manic Pixie Dream Woman just doesn't have the same ring to it, does it? Good Morning Midnight by Jean Rhys is a novel that majorly impacted me and solidified a lot of these questions that had already been simmering. This novel explores what is next for the unhinged woman, and I'm going to try to keep it brief because if you've watched my other videos, you'll know I quite literally can't stop talking about and recommending this book. In 1930s Paris, the narrator finds her old haunts, the bars, cafes, suddenly hostile and unwelcoming. She was married, but her husband is gone. She is a mother, but her child is dead. Jean Rhys's most famous work is Wide Sargasso Sea, which is a Jane Eyre retelling from the perspective of another discarded woman, a confined woman, and subversion, retelling, reframing are a through line in her work. Here, the narrator Sasha traces the steps of the adventurous, free European flaneur, meeting artists and philosophical foreigners, but she's not a man, and there is a constant looming threat, entrapment around every corner. The currency of Sasha's youth is gone. Where is there for the discarded woman to go? She goes to a bar she used to frequent, and somebody asks, what is that old woman doing here? She remembers her ex-husband, asking why doesn't she just drown herself in the Seine? Her existence is not only inconvenient and uncomfortable, but it's absurd, and this observational humour is detached and often extended to the self. And most gratifying to me is that she is perfectly aware of the absurdity of it all, of the world. Dark, cynical, but affirming in so many ways. It's a look at the insanity of navigating a world with no space for you. There is a labyrinthine quality to the setting and the prose. The city of lights is not opening up to her, it is devouring her, and the questions raised in 1939 are startlingly similar to today. Cassandra at the Wedding by Dorothy Baker is one of my favorite novels of all time. It was published in the 1960s and chronicles a chain of events spurred on by the protagonist, a brilliant, gay, mentally unstable master's student named Cassandra. Cassandra is mid-breakdown when she is invited to attend her estranged twin sister's wedding. After crashing her convertible near the family's ranch, fueled by pills and booze, she comes to the conclusion that her very obviously in love sister must be saved from the worst fate imaginable. domestic bliss. If you don't know, in Homer's Iliad, Cassandra was a Trojan priestess doomed by the gods to never be believed despite telling the truth. And this novel is very textually layered. In it, Cassandra's father is a classicist, and with the twins' relationship, there's this underlying presence of Aristophanes' concept of love as a single human split by the gods. There's the fact that Cassandra's name is pagan and her sister's is biblical. This weaving of religion, how the twins do and don't represent a Madonna whore complex. There is just so much that speaks to interpretation, so much on the subjectivity of truth, and such a wisdom in what is included and left out. It feels written from a place of longing, with that same sardonic self-awareness present in Good Morning Midnight and most of the other books I'll be talking about. Although sometimes dramatic, it is never melodramatic, and the final note is tender and heartbreaking and healing all at once. One of my favorite final images to any book I've read. If you've read it, you know, the shoe. It really stuck with me. It's up there with Phoebe Caulfield on the Carousel. Oh. Dark, funny, absurd. Is it possible for a woman to escape convention? What if she doesn't want to? The Autobiography of My Mother by Jamaica Kincaid follows 70-year-old Sula as she reflects on a life of impulse, of freedom and exploration under oppressive colonial powers. Connection for and with Sula is complex, unreachable. Her birth marked her mother's death. From the beginning, she has inhabited this sort of detached reality. For the reader, Sula remains a kind of haze, her shape relying wholly on what she is willing to share with us. But this existence in the in-between allows her an unashamed fleshiness. Menstruation, masturbation, and pregnancy occur with the same acceptance and force of the seasons, consuming and changeable. Like much of Kincaid's work, the Caribbean island is so alive and crawling and present and omnipotent. At the core of her work is colonial identity, specifically the role of girl and woman, as she puts it, not mademoiselle or lady, but those descended from the vanquished and vanquisher, who are never simply man, but are of people. Can inhabiting any sort of role be a freedom? How much are we at the mercy of the cards we've been dealt? It's not a traditional narrative or conventionally told story. The prose can be abstract, but it becomes clear that the protagonist, the symbol of the protagonist, is a manifestation of assumptions and expectations, both to the reader and to herself. Sula is detached, but it's sometimes in a way that doesn't make for the easiest reading experience, but it does ultimately serve the story. Who is this child with no mother and mother with no child? Who is writing this? Who is reading this? What does any of it, a woman's life, mean or amount to in the end? August Blue opens on a world-renowned concert pianist who has walked off stage mid-show in Vienna. Elsa is 34 and no longer a child prodigy. To the concern of her adoptive maestro father, eccentric friends, and the general public, she has seemingly quit at the height of her career. As the world speculates on if she has truly lost it, Elsa decides to travel around Europe tutoring gifted children. Is she doing this to mentor or to protect and shield? The past cannot be changed, certainly not when she is being haunted, figuratively, by visions of a woman who seems so familiar, and also quite literally, because there's a woman who seems to be following her from city to city. Elsa's past is suddenly inescapable, and she has no choice but to piece together the fragments of her life, of her memories. There are echoes of Duras' The Lover in this, in the arrangement of language in a way that feels not logical but intuitive. It blends surreal fragments and matter-of-fact prose, and elements come together long after the final page, which I love. It's this symbiosis of Levy, as if the reader's perception and memory of the narrative is as important to the story as her intent. Motherhood, womanhood, there's a part of my brain only Levy can scratch, truly. Also the recurring cat symbolism, absolutely slayed. I can't not mention Deborah Levy's Living Autobiography trilogy, which explores her life as a writer and as a middle-aged woman and everything that entails. And if you followed me anywhere for a while, you know I'm a Levinator first and a human being second. This memoir series of hers was really life-altering for me. The realization that creativity and identity do not disappear with youth. In fact, life enriches life, which might seem stupidly simple, because it is. But I think as a woman, you go through so much of life feeling wrong and misplaced, wasting so much time mourning, that the fact that when I turn 30, I won't turn to dust, but I won't also be hollowed out. I'll still be me at 40, at 60, at 70, flaws and strengths alike. That realization of the security of companionship with self, it was such a turning point for me. I love you, Deborah Levy. Everybody say thank you, Deborah Levy. Have you been remembering to thank Deborah Levy before you break your bread? Sula by Toni Morrison starts in the 1920s, and we're introduced to two young black girls, Nell and Sula, who meet on the playground and immediately click. One is from a mother determined to be perceived as proper, and the other from a woman known to husbands all over town. A traumatic event solidifies their bond, but then when Sula returns to town as an adult, they are tested. This is some of the best writing on girlhood, the persistence of girlhood into adulthood I've ever read. The depth and reverence given to this friendship is so full of love, of joy and pain and complexity, as the girls grow up surrounded by injustice and are pulled apart by what society expects of black women, and what Nell and Sula expect of one another and of themselves. This is not a nice read, it's not a simple, pondering book. It is rough and brutal, and at the heart of it is Sula, a woman who cannot be boxed into any one role, who is often distressing and infuriating, but also absolutely bewitching. There's a magical element to this novel that doesn't often get discussed, but I absolutely adored. In a pivotal conversation between the two women, now grown with so much having passed between them, Nell asks Sula what she has to show for her life, and Sula responds with, "Show to who?" And Nell says, "It's lonely, ain't it?" And Sula says, "Yes, but my lonely is mine. Now your lonely is somebody else's, made by somebody else and handed to you. Ain't that something? A second-hand lonely." Toni Morrison has got to be one of the smartest people, ever. So I'll just leave you with more of her words, an excerpt from the prologue. "Outlaw women are fascinating, not always for their behavior, but because historically women are seen as disruptive and their status is an illegal one from birth if it is not under the rule of men. In much literature, a woman's escape from male rule led to regret, misery, if not disaster. In Sula, I wanted to explore the consequences of what that escape might be, on not only a conventional black society, but on female friendship. In 1969, in Queens, snatching liberty seemed compelling. Some of us thrived, some of us died, all of us had taste." Right. Toni Morrison. That's it. It's just Toni Morrison. This next one might seem kind of rogue, but I find Persuasion by Jane Austen to be a radical novel. There is a simmering defiance in the quiet, kind Anne Elliot's refusal to bow to bitterness, a rebellion in remaining wholly yourself when social systems and circumstances threaten to lessen your character. And I just finished my annual reread, cried more than ever, and I need to talk about it. So stay seated. The heroine of Austen's last completed novel, and my personal favourite, is introduced to us as Only Anne. She is dependable, level-headed and kind, a spinster whose bloom has passed and now is content to find joy in the happiness of others. Or so it may appear from the outside. Internally, she is in agony, because gentle Anne is passionately, desperately in love with a man deemed unworthy by her family, the same man she was persuaded to break off her courtship with almost a decade ago. In an ironic twist of fate, the Elliot family must face the repercussions of years of financial mismanagement, just as the man whose heart Anne broke, Wentworth, returns to town. He has survived the wars and become a captain, and also incredibly rich. Also just as handsome, as bright and humorous, perfectly positioned to take his pick from the many interested young ladies. However much Anne and Wentworth try to avoid one another, they cannot help but catch the other's eye. The synergy that first drew them together is overwhelming, now suffused with hints of mutual suffering. Is there hope yet? This feels like Austen's most mature work for many reasons. It was her last completed work, and Anne is the oldest of her heroines, and her sense of self is more solidified. At first, she appears a pushover, receiving the rudeness and insults of her family with a smile, but as the novel progresses, it becomes stunningly clear that this placidity is informed by extreme intelligence. She is perfectly aware of what she can and cannot control, and the freedom from traditional roles this invisibility allows. Now, over 200 years later, for a woman who has been put down, deprived, disregarded, and lived in the pressure cooker of patriarchy, for her to remain herself, it is so defiant, and it is so, so moving. This novel is, of course, a melancholic, yearning affair. How can it not be? But the depth and warmth and humour in the relationships is so comforting. Because, of course, Anne still struggles with that life-altering decision all those years ago. How to reconcile the years of suffering inflicted upon herself and onto Wentworth. How not to let guilt and anger eat away at affection. The worst part is that she cannot lie to herself. It is bittersweet, but she must admit that it was not necessarily the wrong choice. To listen to a trusted friend, to be open, it is who Anne is. The taking of the advice she says to Wentworth in this heart-wrenching passage was not wrong, even if the advice itself was. To me, Persuasion is not about giving in to desire and romance, it is about giving up control. However much you yearn to know what could have been, you can't. Anne can only relinquish herself to time, knowing and trusting in herself. And isn't that so terribly wonderful? One for the control freaks, the nostalgia-ridden, overactive imaginers. There's a thread running through all of these works of self-containment, and not in a trapping way, or even really a tranquil way, but in a recognition and acknowledgement of everything the self can contain. And all of these works deal with daughterhood and motherhood in some way or another, and all with isolation. And I think there's something so powerful in passing the age your mother was when she had you, of beginning to identify with her in unexpected ways, not as mum, but as a woman, as a human being. This recognition of personhood, the separation from ideal, is painful, but then what it in turn means for yourself. The way that profound loneliness can be liberating. Julia Kristeva is a feminist, critic, philosopher, psychoanalyst who developed the idea of the abject. To simplify, it's the horror induced by the blurring of boundaries, of self, other, object, subject, and she talks about childbirth as that first experience of abjection, being that very split of self and other. And I think it's no wonder the unhinged woman feels like a rebirth, like a reality-altering split. But I don't want to keep leaving her crying on the floor. Kristeva writes in another one of her books, I think Black Sun, that naming suffering, exalting it, dissecting it into its smallest components, that is doubtless a way to curb mourning. And mourning feels like a perfect word for it, like Anne experiences in Persuasion or Elsa in August Blue, and my mourning feels recognized and is a little relieved when I read these books, and maybe they will offer you some relief along with hopefully some questions. Thank you for watching this video, for liking and subscribing if you did. If you haven't, so fair. And I will see you in the next video. Love you, bye.